All right, welcome back. So I always do previews, then I do news of the day, and then I do a video on something else. And so I racked my brain on today. I'm like, okay, what do I want to talk about? Well, we're far enough out from free agency, but we're close enough to the trade deadline that it might be a good time to look at two things. One, the highest paid players. I'm talking about paid. I'm not talking about cap hit. Highest paid players and how they're doing. And then I want to talk a little bit about the UFAs that are out there, the salaries being made, and again, it's salaries, not cap hit, and whether or not some of these guys are going to get a raise or not, considering we still have a flat cap for next season. We know the cap's not going up next year. We know this. Escrow payments are going to still be high, and the amount of money that the players are going to owe the owners, the amount of money that's going to come out, it's going to be a lot. So this number here is not actually take-home pay for the players, but it does show you who's getting paid the most out of what's left over with all the shutdowns and all the no fans in attendance and everything that's eating away at NHL funds. So first on the board here is the highest paid, highest salaried. Notice I'm not saying cap hit. Cap hit and salaries are two completely different things. And we can get stuck on cap hits. Notice Carey Price is not on the board. His cap hit is higher right now than his actual salary. And I believe that's the case for the rest of his contract. So this is where teams may come in and pick up a guy and we go, wow, they're picking up a guy who's got a $10 million cap hit. What are they thinking? But they may only have to pay the guy $5-6 million. So the cap hit's one thing, the actual salary is another. And this is where I have a reason for wearing Toronto Maple Leafs gear today, because they're getting paid. If you need to borrow $5, I recommend making friends with the Toronto Maple Leafs players. Austin Matthews is the highest paid player in the league at $15.9 million in salary. That is salary. A lot of that is bonus. So, right? I wonder how many emails he gets about investing in cryptocurrency. Probably all of them. So he's the highest paid, but his line mate there, Mitch Marner, $15 million. The two of them combined $30.9 million. You can almost buy a team. So, and that's for the year. That's and even if there's a lot of money being eaten away with everything else going on, hey, they still make a lot of money. Connor McDavid's actually third at $14 million. And remember, at the time he signed that deal with the Oilers, it was seen that he was probably taking less money than he could have got, than he could have asked for, because he wanted to make sure that they could put a team on the ice around him that could compete. Panarin, $13 million. Ranger fans, I think, will say that they got their money's worth this year from Panarin with $13 million. Erik Karlsson, $12 million to San Jose. He's been playing better lately. Still not $12 million worth, not for the season. So again, really high pay there for Erik Karlsson. It's a lot of money. Nick Backstrom. Yeah, Nick Backstrom's the highest paid player out of Washington, $12 million. So he actually makes more money in salary than does Alex Ovechkin, who leads the list of UFAs we will get to. Backstrom's been great this year. He really has. He's been fantastic for Washington. Mikko Rantanen, $12 million in salary. Excellent season he's had. Scoring goals right, left, and center. Maybe somebody sat down and gave him a nudge and said, you make more money than McKinnon, right? Oh, geez, I better score some goals. So, yeah, he's been doing that. He's been pretty good at that. Andrei Vasilevsky, stopping goals for $12 million in salary this year. Absolutely worth it. 110%, absolutely worth it. Tampa's definitely getting a good return on investment there. John Tavares, back to the Toronto Maple Leafs, $12 million. So that is $42.9 million on three players. It's a lot. And notice no other team has that. So again, these guys did a really good job of getting contracts out of Kyle Dubas. They're really, really generous to them. And yeah, it does make things kind of difficult. But I will say this. In Toronto's defense, if we didn't have a cap hit, or if we didn't have salary cap at all, guess what? The Leafs would have a salary of probably, I would say, 120 million they could be at. Like, they'd be at some ridiculous number because Toronto generates so much money. They can afford to spend this. So Kyle Dubas is able to sit down, work out a contract where the cap hit is low enough that he can make it all work under the salary cap but he can pay these guys really generously. And then what he's also been able to do, and again, I'm going to compliment Kyle Dubas, which may surprise people. What he's also been able to do is after he gets these guys in place, he can then convince guys to come in and make less money, like a Joe Thornton, like a Jason Spezza, with the idea that, hey, I've got a team here that might be able to win something. Do you want to come in and be a part of this? It's been a good recipe so far in the regular season. It's the postseason where they've had their issues. We'll see if this year that changes. But while Tavares, I don't think he's played up to the $12 million at this point this year. I know he's still capable of it. And I'm waiting for him to go on a little bit of a goal-scoring tear. It's got to happen at some point, right? Sergei Bobrovsky, $12 million. We've discussed this contract since it was signed. He's being outplayed this year by Drieger. The amount that Drieger outplays him by has shrunk quite a bit. Bobrovsky's been much better, I'll say, over the last month. But it's still a work in progress, and I'm not sure if Florida could go back and do it all over again, especially with how Drieger's playing and with what Carolina's been able to do with Mrazek and Nedeljkovic and Reimer. I don't know if Florida wouldn't go with a more, shall we say, economic option. More of the economy class goaltenders, and so you can, put more out on the ice in terms of your forwards and defense. It's been a raging debate in the NHL for a long time, how much money you spend on your goaltending, how important it is to spend that money on your goaltending. Bobrovsky, Carey Price, the contracts these guys have not changed that conversation at all. Roman Josi, $11.75 million. He had a rough start to the season, has been much better lately. Of course, he had an injury in there as well. And yeah, I still think Josi's one of the best defensemen in the league. Number one for me is Hedman, but you can make arguments for the defenseman. For me, it's still Hedman's number one. And Sebastian Aho, $10.57 million. Remember, at the time that Mark Bergevin put in this contract, he did it to make sure it was a poison pill that the Carolina Hurricanes would walk away from. The Canes waited 7 days and went, thanks. Because while Aho's on this board as one of the highest paid, it also took just that headache off their plate, off their menu. They don't have to worry about that now. Aho's signed. Yeah, he's a UFA at the end of it. They can deal with that after. And they do have to worry about Svechnikov, but I didn't put, when we get to the RFAs, I didn't put anybody who's on like an entry-level contract. Because then you're just talking about guys who are going to get big raises. I want to talk about guys who've already had them. Guys who've already been in the league for a while and already have exited their entry-level contracts and are due for a huge raise. Or ones that maybe they aren't. So the 2021 UFA class, again, ranked just by how much money they make, not by anything else. And then we've got notables here. Alex Ovechkin, $10 million. Can anybody argue to me that Alex Ovechkin should not be paid as much as John Tavares? Because this is a question, and notice Backstrom at $12 million too. This is a question that's going to have to be answered by management in Washington. What is Alex Ovechkin worth after this year? I don't think Ovechkin's going to look for $12 million necessarily, but it could be really interesting to see how those negotiations go and whether or not he wants to be paid at this level. He deserves to be paid at that level. Potentially the best goal scorer in the history of the game. Again, that's all up for debate. My vote would be, he or Mike Bossy, for me, would be the best goal scorer. Bossy's career, of course, shortened by injury. But yeah, Ovechkin is right there. Taylor Hall at $8 million. I don't think he's getting $8 million. Now, I know people will say that comes across as sarcasm. No. When Taylor Hall's a UFA, there will be some sort of a bidding war for his services. And I really think Taylor Hall, to me, seems like the kind of guy who right now will look at it and say $8 million. He's overpaid. Right. Some other GM will pay him a lot of money. And the example I always use is Vinny Lecavalier. How he generated interest, he gets a contract, he gets bought out, and then he gets another contract, which was relatively big for the player he was at that point. There will always be those bidding wars. So a team might come in and say, we want Hall for $4 million. Second team comes in, we'll pay him $4.5 million. Third one, 4.75. Fine, we'll go to 5. And before you know it, you're at 6. And you go, all right, so final offer, $6.5 million. He signs for $6.5 million for, say, 4 years. And halfway through year one, you're like, I don't know why I got caught in that. I don't know. You people who actually do bidding on eBay, you know what I'm talking about. I've got stuck in those myself. I've learned. You go into negotiations on an eBay deal with, this is the max I'm willing to do. You just slap the max number on it and you go, if they bid past that, fine. And I don't know if there's GMs that do that. I don't know if there's a GM, but again, there's some risk to that, right? What if you're the GM that comes in, so the bidding's at 4 million, you go, I'll give him 6.5. All right. And all the other GMs walk away. Oh, they all walked away way too fast on that. Huh. That's interesting. Okay, Mr. Benning, you've got okay. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I swear. 3 million for all your fourth liners. Okay, enough of that. David Krejci, $7 million he makes right now, and I love Krejci. You know, he's one of the holdovers from the 2011 Stanley Cup. Not a $7 million player. I think he'll give Boston a chance to keep him around. I don't think he makes $7 million in salary next year. Tuukka Rask, $6.5 million. I've had the belief this is probably his last season, but at $6.5 million, it's interesting because he takes a lot of flack, and yet he makes $6.5 million. He makes about half of what Bobrovsky or Vasilevsky do. He's not paid as much as I think he would have been if he'd actually gone to market. Gabriel Landeskog, $6.5 million. It depends on the night, and it depends on the week. Like right now, Landeskog looks fantastic, right? That line is clicking again. It's the best line in hockey. I apologize to the article written by Luke Fox today about how the most complete line in hockey might be the first line of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm going to counter with Landeskog, McKinnon, and Rantanen. That, to me, is the most complete line in hockey. And when it's going, there's not a line in the league that can compete with it. None. And there's other great lines, but man, when that line's going. And Brandon Saad, $6.5 million. He's UFA this summer. I do not think he stays in Colorado. I think because of other contracts that are coming up, I think that Joe Sakic will let him go unless he's willing to come back for less. Because again, Colorado has some Makar-like money they have to hand out. Makar's going to make some serious cash, and they want to make sure that they have other monies around so that when other guys need to get raises, named McKinnon, they can do that. So we'll see what happens with Saad. I think for $6.5 million, I think that's kind of high for him too. I'd be kind of surprised if he doesn't make less on the next contract. But again, with the market being as it is, all it takes is a bidding war. And next thing you know, he's still making $6.5 million next year. Now the RFAs, I'll come back over here. The RFAs, Patrick Laine, a couple years ago, betting on himself. That's basically what he said when he signed that bridge deal, right? $7.5 million a year. Feeling, I think it was $10 million he wanted. It was a really high number. He felt that he shouldn't necessarily make Matthews money, but I'm sure when he looked at what Marner was making, he was thinking, hey, I'm at least as big a star as Marner. Laine, his next contract, it might be the most important move that Jarmo Kekalainen makes. And it might be the most important thing for the Columbus Blue Jackets, I'll say for the next 5 years. If they sit down with Laine and they give him a raise on the $7.5 million, if he ends up making $9 or $10 million, I really believe they'll regret it. If they offer him less than that $7.5 million, I don't know that he takes it. And I don't know that if they don't find a way, like if they don't qualify him and he ends up going to market as an unrestricted free agent, I don't know that he won't make $7.5 million as an unrestricted free agent. Let's just say Crazy Town. Columbus decides we're not going to give him a qualifying offer. He just didn't play that well here. And he does go to market as a UFA. There absolutely would be a bidding war for Patrick Laine. And it doesn't matter how he plays from here. It's that what he might be and what he could do. You're going to get at least 2 or 3 teams that are bidding for his services. And I'm just being conservative on that. Hit the goal scoring he showed early in his career. A team like Florida, if they had the money, that would be a perfect fit for them. And you're trying to find the perfect fit for Patrick Laine. You need the right coach. You need the right team. You need a more offensive-minded team, I think, and one that you have a coach that doesn't really care about back-checking or the defensive effort. And yet last year in Winnipeg, he had a lot of that straightened out. So last year in Winnipeg, when he bought in and he wasn't trying to score goals all the time and he was actually a pretty good all-around player, I thought he had his best season ever in the NHL. If you can rediscover that and have him just forget about this season, which has been mostly a write-off, yeah, he may end up being worth that money. Sam Reinhart, $5.2 million, I believe stays in Buffalo. Probably gets a raise on the $5.2 million. I know it's been a disappointing season for basically anybody in a Buffalo jersey. I don't think Reinhart's been as much of a disappointment as a lot of others. And if they do entertain the idea of, God forbid, trading Jack Eichel which I think would, that's going to bite him. Like a year or two down the road, wherever Eichel goes, he's lifting a Stanley Cup. And Sabres fans just throw their hands in the air and go, of course, yep, of course. And then he'll give a speech and say, oh, it all to Ryan O'Reilly. He was such an inspiration to me. So, yeah, see what happens. But I think they keep Reinhart. And I think there's other players on this team that'll stick around. Pavel Buchnevich, $3.5 million. He will get a raise. Tyler Bertuzzi at $3.5 million. The injuries he's had this year, he probably, I would predict Bertuzzi gets another bridge deal of a year or two, probably for around the same cap hit. Kevin Fiala at $3.5 million. He's going to make some money. It was a slow start for him. He started taking off with what he showed last year as well, especially in the return, where on a couple of occasions against Vancouver, he was the only Minnesota Wild forward who seemed to have the effort, and he scared the hell out of the Vancouver Canucks and their fans during that whole series. So I think he's going to get paid. Brandon Carlo at $3.5 million. He'll make more money than that next year for Boston. He's an underrated defenseman, I think in part because he's a defensive defenseman, but he's a key guy for Boston. Really missed him when he was out. So I think he's going to get a raise. Now we come over here to where things get really interesting. So sort of maybe the under the radar sort. I rank them by points. Tyson Barrie, $3.75 million. Does he want to get paid, or does he want to stay in Edmonton? I don't know that Edmonton would offer him the most money right now on the market. I think he's got a ton of points, playing with McDavid and Draisaitl. I would not be surprised to see him make the smart move and stay in Edmonton. I think it's the best move Barrie could make. I don't know if it's a short-term deal. I'll say probably, again, because of the flat cap and all that. But it could be really interesting to see Tyson Barrie staying in Edmonton and what that would look like. Does he take a contract for, say, $5 million a year for 2 or 3 years? Is he willing to do that? They've got to give him a raise over the $3.75 million because he's been fantastic. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, $6 million. There's another interesting contract for Edmonton, and it's been talked about like they're working towards a contract. No, they aren't. Well, they're talking about it. Nope. So depending on which side you're on, either they'll probably re-sign him or maybe he leaves, which would be alarming to a lot of Edmonton fans because he's kind of been a Swiss Army knife for them. Play down the middle, play on the wing, first line, second line, third line, wherever you need him to go, he goes. And for that reason, he may very well still be worth that $6 million. He may be able to argue that he's worth more. Dougie Hamilton at $6 million. And this feels familiar, right? As a Bruins fan, it feels familiar to watch Dougie Hamilton having this dance about his contract and the team saying all the right things. I remember Boston doing the same thing, and then Hamilton was suddenly gone. He was traded off to Calgary. And so Boston could blow the 3 draft picks in a row that year. It was 2015. That was just great. It's a good thing I didn't have a channel back then because if there'd been a live stream of that draft, my reaction, it'd still be like viral everywhere because I yelled and screamed a lot when they drafted Sporel and Senyshyn and DeBrusk. And all 3 of them were playing for the Bruins in their last game. Doesn't make me not wish it had been. I wanted Barzal and Konechny and Connor. I thought would have been good too. I basically, I'm not going to pretend I was hoping for Besser. I'm not going to retcon in that there were players I was hoping for they didn't draft that I didn't. But I really liked Konechny. I really liked Barzal especially. And I was like, oh, Barzal's dropped to the Bruins. This is going to be great. They didn't draft Barzal. And again, yeah, the swearing was a lot. A lot of cursing that day. Zach Hyman, $2.5 million. So suddenly the question's being asked, can Toronto, who's paying a lot of money to these guys, can they afford to keep Zach Hyman? And it's not as simple as going to Matthews and Marner and going, okay, guys, it's me, Kyle. Can you guys give up $1 million each so we can keep Zach Hyman? Because I don't have the cap space to keep him. And if you guys could just give me the NHL doesn't do that. So, hey, John, you make $12 million. Can you give him $1 million over too? And then done, right? That'd be $3 million. He makes 2.5. You can throw him an extra $700,000. It's $3.7 million. Done. And that might be what Hyman's next contract looks like. And if it happens, I called it. Just saying, if it happens, I called it. But yeah, Hyman at $2.5 million is underpaid. Absolutely. Considering what he's done this year. And he's a hard worker. he also is proven to be a bit of a Swiss Army knife. He can fit in wherever you put him. He doesn't complain either. If he drops down the lineup, he does not complain. Which, for Mitch Marner's credit, he did the same thing. He did not complain when he got dropped to the fourth line. He just fought his way back up to the first. Mike Hoffman, $4 million. So he gave St. Louis the 1 year, $4 million contract. I think in part because of flat cap and everything being as it is, and because he wanted a chance to win. And so he went to St. Louis with that belief. His play in St. Louis, kind of a mixed bag overall. So I don't know. I don't know what Hoffman would make on his next contract. I'll guess that it's more than $4 million. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. It'll be interesting to see if maybe he stays in St. Louis next year, right? If he enjoys it, maybe he sticks around, maybe not. But it'll be interesting to see. And then the one RFA, and I can't believe he's still an RFA because he's 26 years of age, but I guess he's 1 year away from UFA status. Andrew Kopp, $2.3 million. I've been a huge fan of Andrew Kopp's for a long time. I would be very surprised if he doesn't end up in Seattle. Just saying, I'd be very surprised if Kopp doesn't end up being the player that's out of Winnipeg and headed to Seattle. When you look at who they have to protect and who they can hold on to, Kopp may end up being a guy who they end up protecting, sure. But I could see a scenario where he ends up being the guy that goes to Seattle. And it's just nice to see that the scoring is finally caught up to where his work ethic is. The work ethic has always been there. And it's nice to see a player work really, really hard and get rewarded. And this year, he should get rewarded during the summer. So there you go. Andrew Kopp. So here's a question for all watching right now. UFAs you're looking at for this summer. RFAs you're looking at for this summer. And which guy on this board, here or over here, do you think is most underpaid, most overpaid? And again, this is just salaries. This is not cap hit. So we would say, this guy's cap's this. Shannon's got this wrong. No, I don't care about the cap. I'm saying this is what they're getting paid this season. Which guy do you think's overpaid? Which one do you think's underpaid? Sidney Crosby, of course, by today's standard, is underpaid. At the time that he signed that contract, it was right about where it was probably supposed to be, which puts it in favor of the longer-term contracts or not. And that's a question, too. Long-term contracts. Good, bad, ugly? What do you think? Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And do not forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing right through, you just tapping upon this video. I'll talk to you guys again soon.